Okay, he's already jumped on. Right. Okay. All right. Great. Let me just make sure to add Fred, and then we'll. He didn't come on.
I'll let you type it on yours.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Okay. Just have to add a. I don't see him. I don't know if he's still on. Okay, there he goes. He joined. Can you hear me,
Hello.
Brett?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay, good. They can hear us too now. So
Oh, they could. Okay.
everything is good. All right.
Awesome.
Sorry about that, everyone. Apologize, but at least it all came through again. I just am gonna have to reboot everything before we our live broadcast. I think that'd probably be the best thing to do. But if you would, yeah, give out everybody your social media contacts, your website.
Yeah, mysterybabylon.com is my website. Just got up a while ago. And I have two volumes out right now. I have one in the works. Hopefully will be out within a couple months. Hopefully by the end of February is my goal. And they all are on Zen's website. So on the bookstore. So feel free to browse and go check it out over there. That'd be great. If anybody's interested.
I know you said you had a release coming out, and
Yeah.
so any timing for that? You said by the end of the year. Is that correct?
Hopefully by it was, but it'd be pushed back probably by the end of February. But that should be hopefully it.
Right on.
I'm so excited with that. So because it's been probably about 4 years now. I've been working 3 or 4 years. I mean, it's been a while since I put that one when all the other ones out. So yeah, I'm excited. It should be very good, very telling. So yeah, and if you feel like anyone feels like email me about any questions, thoughts, comments, I'll put it in the chat. mysterybabylon@1791.com. Feel free if you read any of the material and anything interests you or sparks a question. How have you been, Zen?
Okay, great. And thank you again, everybody, for bearing with us and for holding on there and being persistent. We love you all, and I'm grateful to be here with you all as we are moving into a new year. It's crazy, brother. We're 3 days off from 2024.
Can you believe it?
Yeah, this year has gone by so very fast. Definitely a beautiful year. Looking forward to moving into the new season and looking forward to the beginning of spring, even though I do get a lot done during the winter, but I do prefer the spring, summer, and fall.
Yes, me too.
Yeah. So, give us a little bit about the changes that you've been focusing on and the additions that you've made. Kind of what is the from cover to cover. What kind of stuff are you bringing forth and sharing and focusing on with this publication?
Which one? The new one?
Yeah, the new one.
The new one is a little different because the last 2 volumes have been more concerned with the parallel between early Genesis and around the flood and Noah's day to today and the happenings of today. So it's pretty much been back and forth and how you can see one side back then and how today you can start to see the signs everywhere. It's very interesting. But this latest one deals more of a chronology of the very beginning back in the Garden of Eden all the way up. And I go into straight through. I don't use a huge parallel. I use a chronology that goes right from after the flood, goes into the times of the occupation where Israel gets taken away, split up, and all the way into the Dark Ages and into the Renaissance. I mean, I go one straight shot showing the remnants of these early times and the battle that still ensues. and it's quite interesting. I believe, but I think people will enjoy it.
That's awesome. There's been a lot of interest, I think, of late, especially with regard to the bloodlines,
Hmm.
that people are really considering um, this teaching in more so than they have ever before. And I think that's a positive and a beneficial thing because it's so, I believe, important for making sense of the fullness of the scripture and the things that we find that are connected to it that aren't being taught, by the mainstream churches. Just the whole theme of, even the elites against the masses and what they call the goyim, how all that is
Yeah,
playing out. So very, very important. But
the
I don't
cat.
want to give a lot of time to not, because we did cover so much in the last couple of shows. I do want to focus on your book and your work. So um, I say let's go ahead and get into it, brother. Wherever we had stopped, and let's pick it up and get into some of this new material. Give
Okay.
you a chance to share and
Okay.
read some.
Yeah, what I have been doing, Zen and I have been doing here for a year or two. We've been going over the first volume, which is called The Way of Cain, and I'm in the second part now. They become rather big, and Zen actually had a good suggestion to split them up rather than have just one huge volume. So I did. So we're into the second part of the first volume, and we're about 150 pages in. So before we get into it, I wanted just to say one comment on what you said just now, and I think it's very important, especially in this new volume that I'll be having out, is because we need to get the backstory of a lot of things that are going on today, like especially this Israeli Hamas fight and etc. And whose land is it, and the history of how it goes way back, because people can say, oh, Israel invaded that land, etc. And you know, but there's so much more history to everything that's going on. Even the corruption, even the not so good sounding parts are something that we really need to know to understand fully, in my opinion. And I think when I get this next volume out, people will be able to at least see a lot of these things that they might have been missing and might not be able to get access to. So,
Well, I definitely want you to talk about that. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
it's
Well,
very, very important. And so, um, yeah, can you kind of generalize and lead us into a discussion of that? Because, so many people don't know the backdrop, don't know the story. They have no idea as to that, the globalists tied back to even the creation of the mafia and the Freemasons and that
mm-hmm,
whole radical extremist secret societies and their the order, the establishment, whatever you want to call it, their focus on creating this plan, and how it was that one of these riders carrying this plan was struck down by lightning. I believe that is without a doubt supernatural, and it was a way for the Most High to bring forth the sinisterness of the plot that they were uh, planning against the entire world. So,
what was that? The struck by lightning? I don't know if I've heard that.
yeah, as far as how we receive the protocols
Oh,
of
right.
the learned
Okay.
elders of Zion, a copy of that whole domination playbook, which is exactly what it is. It's a letter to the insiders, those that are part of the New World Order agenda, the bloodlines, the elites, the royal families that have been plotting and working on behalf of the Brotherhood of the Serpent, the Order of the Dragon, whatever you want to call it, that they've been working in the covert, through the secret societies to establish this agenda for world domination. And it's not just to, as it speaks about, not just to uh, create and establish Jerusalem as a cup of trembling amongst the nations, which is absolutely prophetic and something that was allowed to happen in order to take us into this whole crisis where we see the current conflict of, the nations, and even with what's going on in Palestine and Gaza. And so, yeah, if you would give us a background on that and help people to understand more. And
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit. I if that's okay, because when I get the book out, I really want to start talking about it a lot more. But I can surely give everyone some thoughts and pretenses that I have already about the information. It seems one thing that's interesting to me is that we always, like, in the media and such, we hear about people talking, well, so and so, this land was someone else's land and this and that, or we hear that in a lot of different countries in a lot of different situations. But a lot of us don't really think, okay, well, where do we draw the line? And what if, because again, there were Jews and there were Israelites in that land for 2000 years ago. They're in there. So where does that boundary lie of, okay, are you invading that land, Israel, because you were there 2000 years ago? So isn't that your land? We have to kind of look and decide, okay, where do we draw the line on how far back we can go to decide whose land that was, And if we start to look at the ancient sources, that we do see is that we find that Noah actually dictated for the children of Shem to live in that land. And Shem, of course, was an ancestor of Israel and Abraham. So there we go. We have already dictated to the sons of Shem, the Semites. Okay, but then we have Canaan not really wanting to go into the land that he was dedicated to go to, or supposed to go to, which was the northwestern tip
hold
of
on, Brett.
Africa.
We're at break.
Okay.
So
I'll
yeah, this
continue
is the Thursday night show, so we have more breaks on this teleclass, but
Gotcha. No
yeah.
problem.
So we'll be right back, everyone.
We'll be right back.
Give us 3 minutes.
It's not okay for you to be a weak loser. It's not okay. And the reason it's not okay is because you could be way more than that.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
I love motherhood more than I could have ever imagined. One of the most important things to me is nurturing a strong foundation in Yahusha's character in our children. That said, I made sheets that went over the fruits of the Spirit, the armor of God, the 10 Commandments, and creation days. Each day at breakfast, we would go over these and then read books like Cat in the Hat that just felt so void in meaning, but they loved the rhymes. I looked everywhere for rhyming biblical principles and couldn't find any. That's when I decided I would make them myself. Praise God, we now have our first book, Eliana and Ezra's journey through the fruits of the Spirit. A first in a series, every morning we now can continue to build strong principles even through rhymes, and I wanted to offer it to the babies in your life too. Please go to Sacred Word Publishing and search Fruits of the Spirit to get your copy, or you can go to prophecyforchildren.com. Thank you so much.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
I am.
Gotcha.
Sorry, brother. The bumper music was supposed to also play, but yeah, let's go ahead and turn it back over to you, and let's get this show rolling.
Okay. Yeah. So the reason, I mean, this is just one example because, a lot of things that you talked about, which do make a lot of sense with the families and the bloodlines and etc. I get into that, but I get into more of the corruption that has been going on throughout the years, and it's mainly Edomite corruption, which I'm sure you know a lot about. And what I was saying about Noah and the Semites is basically, whose land was that to begin with? If the Canaanites and the sons of Canaan actually went and took over that land, then they did it nefariously, and they needed to be dispersed because that wasn't the land that Noah dictated. So again, the Israelites had to take over the land, and they did, and now it's their land, but then they were kicked out by the Romans. So we have to kind of really look at history and how far back do we go, and some of the forces bringing this all apart and coming together as a nation in 47 and etc. All these things, there's hands that kind of guide a lot of these things coming back together, and it's been doing this for over this whole time. So that's what I get into in this new book, is just the pathway that this whole Edomite expansion has taken.
Well, that's all very important, especially for understanding the false left-right paradigm, and so many people do get involved in that and fighting for, supporting the Democrats and the left, or the conservatives and the right, the Republicans, however it is played out. There's definitely controlled opposition, and we are being led into believing one way or the other, and there's a lot which I believe is upside down, as far as truth, that everything is confused, and the culture is confused, the world is confused. There's so many people that are being caught up in the occult and the whole ancient alien, the strong delusion, and that whole phenomena. And so just a lot of people being led astray and getting caught up in the things that they should not be. But that's what the scriptures also relate to us and tell us as well. And so, comment on that.
There would even be a strong delusion that would come to a lot of people.
Right.
And that always fascinated me, because if you look at your neighbor and think, why would they think such a thing? Why would you believe that? And it's almost like in the Matrix, that you come out of the Matrix and you look at all these other people, they're just believing something and hopelessly following it. And it's just, again, is that part of the strong delusion that was in the Bible?
Right.
Okay, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I do think so. That the scriptures warn to us, relate to us, that there would be a famine for the word, that there would be a lack of truth available, and that most people not understanding that is what would be the root with regard to the confusion and to the madness, because these are literally some mad times.
And it's being orchestrated. It's slowly being taken out and diluted.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's nothing that we shouldn't expect that was going on, because the world has to be a certain unification for the Antichrist to take control, pretty much.
Right. Right. And I was talking about, I believe it was last night, we were speaking about how the scriptures also warn us that there would be this great falling away.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think we are in the middle of that, that there's a lot of, falling away into sin and people embracing the occult and the ancient pagan religions, the belief that the Anunnakis are our creators. I mean, these are the kind of things that had deceived peoples and cultures way back in the past. And we see that these things are strong in the forefront of the challenge of what people are coming to know and regard as truth. There's just so much confusion, but again, it's a time where my people would be killed for lack of knowledge. But I do also see that there's a great movement to awakening as well, and that a lot of people are starting to understand and learn about the gospel and the prophecies and the things that have been expounded upon, especially in a lot of the extra biblical narratives. And so that's a beautiful thing too, to see people coming to light.
That's good. We just hope that they'll still be able to get enough resources and find the way to actually, continue on, because I think a lot of people, like you said, are waking up, but they don't know where to go. And especially when the public schools and such have taken God out of everything, something needs to fill that void. And people are looking for all different things. And that's why you get so many people going off the rails in so many kind of, different ways, is because I think they're looking for something. They're looking for self-fulfillment and purpose and such in their lives. And to take God out of it, it's basically they're looking towards themselves and what do I need to do, to make myself self-actualized and fulfilled and such. And it's hard because people, these things are taken away, or they're looked upon as, oh, you shouldn't look outside the Bible, etc. No, I mean, just use discernment, and there's nothing wrong with using your own brain and looking around and just seeing if all things make sense. I would not want to just blindly follow preachers in universities just because they say so. I want to know more.
Yeah, me neither. I'm not one of those that is a big time follower of anything. Not at all. I'm not a sheeple kind of type of person. But
okay. So with that said and done, I think what we're getting into now, we did talk a little bit about where we left off was getting into the flood itself and Noah preparing the ark, getting people on board. I personally believe there was more than just 8 souls on board. I think there was a number of other people on board because God needed to save the pious in certain groups as well, like the giants, because they were around after the flood. And, how did they survive after the flood if they were all destroyed before? And the Canaanites needed to be around after the flood to fulfill the prophecy of Genesis 3:15. If their descendants were around to try to take Jesus out and to bruise his heel, that prophecy would never be fulfilled. So some Canaanites had to survive as well. Your take on that, Zen?
Well, yeah, I think that and as I've covered, I think that the story of the scriptures is specific to Noah and his generations and Adam and his
Right.
bloodline, but that
Does-
there are, it's clear that there are survival accounts and that other peoples in different portions of the world uh, did survive and were able to make it through. And so, yeah, I think that, and there's flood stories from many, many, many different cultures.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think that, we have to be careful to just uh, assume we know how everything unfolded, especially when you have multiple witnesses that that's the way we establish truth is by the comparison of all these parallel accounts and reading and studying the eyewitness testimonies of those that did survive and that passed on the knowledge. Even like with the story of the travels of Noah by Berosus, I think that is a
Right.
fascinating account and story. What was you had made mention that one time about the individual that wrote about how Noah was told to take Nama as his wife. It was one of the authors that you had made mention of recently. I was trying to remember that book again.
To take Nama as his wife?
Yeah, and you were talking about how it confirmed the serpent seed surviving after the flood, and the Ham and uh,
Oh,
the
yeah. Yeah. As his second wife. At part 2 of my first volume does have, he probably had a first wife. I think the writings of Abraham basically talk about that now that I'm looking here. And Noah took her on the wise for the Lord, for the word of the Lord came unto Noah, saying, take unto thyself Naamah, the daughter of Lamech, who dwelleth here in the city of thy fathers, for she has been faithful to my gospel, wherefore I shall preserve through her the seed of Cain through the flood. So that's writings of Abraham 12:2. So that's one.
yeah, no,
Actually,
this
there's
was a different individual, and
it
it
wasn't a
wasn't
book.
it was like the guy that wrote Two Babylons or something of that nature.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. It was oh man, what was his name? Let me think.
Sorry, I put you on the spot.
That's okay. I think his name was Johnson was his last name. And he wrote, oh, I gotta think about it. Just see here.
Yeah, take your time. But it was a fascinating book and account, and I definitely wanted to bring it to the forethought of everybody.
Yeah, on our break, I'll go look it up. But yeah, I know
Yeah,
exactly what you're
okay,
talking about.
no problem.
He's the guy that went off, and these books are fascinating because I have them practically all. But he went off and he compared the Parthenon and
Right.
and a whole bunch
Yes.
of other Greek vases,
Yes.
ancient
Yes.
Greek vases, and because a lot of them they have draw pictures of their gods, okay, the Greek gods,
Right.
and so many of them actually parallel the days before the flood. It's just it's amazing. They have Cain, they have Cush, they have Nimrod, and they have Nama on there too. And
Nice.
it's interesting the way he actually shows the whole story, the whole untold story by the pagan Greeks themselves. That they basically say the same thing that we talked about as far as the Tower of Babel. And so it's pretty fascinating. I'll get you the guy's name right after that. But
Yeah,
um,
no problem.
okay, so let me
But
get
yeah,
the
that's the guy for sure.
yeah, that was good. I'll get that for you. Okay, one thing that I believe, and again, because when we talk about the eighth souls that went through the flood, that's my hint that I found that symbolizes that there could actually be more people aboard, because when they're talking about, you said yourself, Zen, about, this is the book of the generations of Adam, kind of talking about that line that goes down as far as the Bible itself. And there are 8 souls, which it's talked about in the flood, that have survived. And I believe that those are the 8 souls that needed to go through the flood to help perpetuate the seed of Adam there, so that prophecy can be fulfilled. Okay, doesn't mean that there weren't other people aboard the ark, but they were just talking that they wanted to make sure that 8 souls, at least a number of souls, were aboard the ark, so they can procreate and they could eventually pass on that seed line, so they can fulfill that prophecy. Okay, and the different ones, I obviously, Nama would not be of Adamite blood, is because she was obviously a Canaanite. So you have to knock one off there. And Ham, again, if that's her son, which I believe it is, her and Noah, that he would be half Canaanite too. And then I saw, and Ham's wife was known not to be of Adamite blood too. So she had a Canaanite blood in herself. So those 3, you take out those 3, and I believe that there are 3 other people. And you look at some pagan writings like Gilgamesh and etc., and you start to see that they have 3 other people that could be aboard, like the pilot, the handicraftsman of the ark, etc., that could actually be part of the 8. I think we talked about that last time, but I just kind of reverbed that. So
Yeah.
now that we have 8 aboard ready to go, and I believe, like I said, there could be a multitude of other people had to go for whatever reason, or I think God was merciful and he wanted some from every group to be aboard that was around at that time. So we have the flood, and it's imminent, and it's going to happen. Now, this beginning talk that we'll be having is some interesting thoughts about why it had to be a flood itself, which is just kind of fascinating, because it tells us about the times that they actually lived in. Okay, we know it was corrupt, and we know they did some nasty things, etc. But why a flood? Can you give me your thoughts on why a flood? Just curious.
Because the giants, I think that the Most High had to drown them to get rid of them and to bring on the demise of them, and they're so haughty and proud, and they think that they can get away from judgment. They don't even uh, consider belief in the Most High, just because they think they're above all that.
Mm-hmm.
But so I think that we see in the Book of the Giants that the stories, that the dreams that the giants were receiving was about their coming decimation, and that Adam was even given the warning of the destruction of the earth by water and fire before he was cast out of paradise. So
yeah, I heard that too. I heard the first one would be a judgment by water, and the
yeah,
second one would, the end times, would be a judgment by fire, right?
right.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you're totally spot on. That's awesome. But I totally agree with you on that. And I think there were a few more things that I found in the research. If you look at a really hard rain, it does seem to wash away, a lot of things off of land if you're looking outside, and it does seem to clean up the area or whatever, And I think I think God has a lot of ironic ways that he works in the world. And I think since the land was becoming so polluted, physically polluted in many moral ways, that it needed a good washing. Okay. And that's part
Yeah.
of the whole story by the flood.
Mm-hmm.
And once we dig a little deeper into some of these accounts that we see about the flood itself and how it went about, it becomes fascinating to see that, oh, okay, now I'm starting to see how God works. I mean, he punishes measure for measure, and he works measure for measure. If you're going to be disrespectful and very belligerent towards God, then something's going to happen to you in that similar or like manner. And that's what I find fascinating in some of these accounts. So let's get into it. So I believe, again, a lot of the impurities that were actually going on were these sexual impurities, just to be blunt. And I think the creation of these giants by the sons of the Nephilim with women who wanted to get information and power basically was one of the main reasons why God was so upset with the world, is because it was just kept going on, and these descendants were being formed. You agree on that one?
Yeah. Mhm.
Now, as it seemed to get closer and closer to the flood, though, there are certain attitudes with people that they didn't even seem like they cared. Because I think we talked in our last discussion about the bow that was, and again, this is a story, but they said there was a bow in the sky with an arrow, okay, pointing down on people. And if you look, there was a bow and an arrow in the sky, which is kind of frightening. But then after the flood, there was just a rainbow. So in other words, God's saying, okay, flood is over, nothing but peace now, no war, no arrow. Okay, we just have the rainbow, which is kind of interesting, just an interesting tidbit and thought. Okay, so God was giving these people signs below, and nobody really seemed to care because they were so brainwashed in what they were doing and all this, the sacrilege and all of this the sexual nastiness they were doing. They really didn't seem to care. And in the our Eleazar, we have, from Cain arose and were descended all the generations of the wicked who rebel and sin. And they said, we do not need the drops of thy rain, neither to walk in thy ways. As it is said, yet they said unto God, depart from us. So they really didn't even care of any kind of threats, and Noah was out there trying to preach to them to say, please, this is going to be horrible. You guys have to turn from your evil ways. And they didn't really care. Some did, like I'm sure you said, Zen, earlier, where some believed, especially a lot of the giants. They were having dreams, and they went up to Enoch, where he was hiding out, probably up in the mountains, and they were getting scared because they knew that something was. But the regular people themselves didn't really care. Now, another thing that was going on was, I think people started to rationalize. They started saying, okay, well, and this may be a little graphic, but they started thinking, okay, if these children, these offspring are the problem, then let's just not have any children. Okay, let's just stop whatever they're practicing. Let's just stop and not be allowed to have any children. Maybe abort them, etc. Okay, some of those things were actually occurring back in those days with the use of mandrake, etc. Okay, but the ones that were actually being born, of course, a lot of them were giants. So in that twist of fate and that ironic way that God works, is when this flood was actually about to start, we recall that water started spewing up from the ground. Okay, because people were wasting away and throwing things out, and they weren't exactly, they were aborting fetuses, etc., whatever. So now all the water was coming up from the ground to come back to get them. That was one of the reasons behind why the fountains of the deep opened up at first before the rain. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, the whole theme of that I think it's important to understand is that it wasn't just humanity. Yeah, everybody, as far as the children of Adam, had gone the way of Cain, but still, it was the presence of the giants here in the world that was the dominant threat to the children of Noah.
Right.
And so the Most High brought on the flood in particular as a judgment against the fallen angels for what they had did in taking wives, of all which they chose.
Right.
And so that, go ahead.
Isn't that even in the Bible where it says 15 cubits above the ground did the water arise so that it would take out any tall, really tall
Right.
giant.
Yes. Hmm.
That always fascinated me because I was wondering why they would say it would go that high, but of course it's just a little above, any giant that can get that high, and now it makes sense.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. And having to flood the world like that, which there's proof of this with all the different ocean creatures that have been found in all the various parts of the world, and seashells at the top of the Himalayan mountains.
Yeah.
I mean, things like that. It shows that without a doubt that the whole earth, as it says in the book of Enoch about the lofty roof of the world, that this was flooded and that everything was drowned in that manner. So
Yeah. Another interesting tidbit that I've found is, again, a lot of sexual improprieties. One ironic way that God actually started working the flood itself is the water that started coming up from the deep was boiling hot, as if it was coming up from hell or coming up from the underworld. And that started burning people as they were trying to escape. Actually, I have it in Ginsberg's In the Legends of the Jews. I have a quote: "As their sensual desires had made them hot and inflamed them to immoral excesses, so they were chastised by means of heated water." So it's pretty interesting. And in the Talmud, actually, the Babylonian Talmud, we have the people in the generation of the flood sinned with hot passion, and with hot water they were punished. So it's just fascinating to see this ironic comeback by God. It says, okay, you want to act that way? Here's the water. Here you go. And this would also, then the rain started, and the rain actually was the same type of hot water. And it was about this time that the people know that God wasn't kidding, and not to ignore him anymore. By that time, it was too late.
right. All
I
right,
got
brother. Hold on, everybody. We are at break, and so we'll be back in about 3 minutes.
okay.
Hi, my name is Ella, and I'm 10 years old. I'm one of the millions of children born to parents suffering from the sheeple virus. Symptoms include the inability to think for oneself, the attention span of a goldfish, and a strong belief in government and the mainstream media. It is estimated that 1 out of every 2 children are being raised by parents infected with the sheeple virus. But there is a cure.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
I love motherhood more than I could have ever imagined. One of the most important things to me is nurturing a strong foundation in Yahusha's character in our children. That said, I made sheets that went over the fruits of the Spirit, the armor of God, the 10 Commandments, and creation days. Each day at breakfast, we would go over these and then read books like Cat in the Hat that just felt so void in meaning, but they loved the rhymes. I looked everywhere for rhyming biblical principles and couldn't find any. That's when I decided I would make them myself. Praise God, we now have our first book, Eliana and Ezra's Journey Through the Fruits of the Spirit, a first in a series. Every morning we now can continue to build strong principles even through rhymes, and I wanted to offer it to the babies in your life too. Please go to Sacred Word Publishing and search Fruits of the Spirit to get your copy, or you can go to prophecyforchildren.com. Thank you so much.
So we'll get them out as soon as we can. We appreciate those of you that do use it as a tool and that you have benefited from, learning about how the luminaries are in movement above the earth and how the earth is fixed, stationary, and non-moving according to the word of the Most High. And it's just a beautiful thing to come to know the truth about things. And people always say, well, what does it matter about biblical cosmology or the truth? And I think just truth for its own sake matters. I want to know the truth, and the reason I study and read from and examine the Bible so thoroughly is because I know it to be a trustworthy source of information, and that it is the prophecies that were led and by the Most High given to our patriarchs and matriarchs over time and age, and that was written for us so that we could understand where we are, where we're living, and what's going on from the end to the beginning, because the Most High knows and shows that He knows by revealing it in such manner. But Brett, turn it back over to you, brother. We can continue on with the examination of your books and your work.
Okay. Well, first I wanted to say, Zen, is that I found that book. It's
Oh,
Robert.
great.
If you'd
'Cause,
like.
yes.
Robert Bowie Johnson is his name.
All right.
All right, put it in the chat.
Thank you. Yes.
And book that I really liked, it was called Genesis Characters and Events in Ancient Greek Art. But it's a long name, but just look up his name. He's on Amazon.
All right. Yeah.
The Parthenon Code is another one. I'll put it in there.
Sweet.
But yeah, just that one is fascinating because that one has all Namad, has Cush, has Cain, it has everybody of that persuasion of paganism that
Yeah,
that
that
actually
line.
what they did. Even Nimrod, it has him in there. So it's pretty interesting the way he did it. So
Nice. Well, thank you, brother, for looking it up and bringing it forward again. I wanted to order it and get it, and I didn't want to forget who you had mentioned. So thanks.
sure. Okay. Um, here we go. So yeah, there it is. There's the name of the book. Okay. Anyhow, where are we at? Okay. There was another Greek, or actually, he's a Jewish historian, and he makes comments on this. Back in the 1700s, he has another book. His name's Eisenmenger. His book, his quote is about the people who are actually trying to stop the flood from occurring. Okay. They stretched out their feet and stopped up all the holes of the abyss. But what did God? He made the waters of the abyss boiling hot so that their flesh was scalded and the skin came off. So it must have been very, very bad. And when they even tried to, because if you think about it, with the ark standing there, okay, and not actually afloat yet, people were going to run to that ark and try to force their way in, right? But
Right.
of course, if the water is scalding and they're sitting there trying to bang on the side of the ark, they're going to have a really hard time. And I think it's with the Legends of the Jews and a few other ancient or other books that have commentary on this. It was what, like 700,000 people in that area? Is that right? Is that what you've heard, then? About that much?
Yes, and also, it makes mention. I forget exactly which text, but the idea of the burning of the feet was that the giants were claiming and saying that they could use their feet to stand upon and to stop up what were the
Yep.
foundations of the deep.
Mm-hmm.
And because of their boast, the Most High, brought forth the hot water to burn and to scald their feet and to, show them a lesson. And
Mm-hmm.
so that was one of the particulars behind that story as well.
I even heard something even seedier, that they actually threw their children into the holes. They had and to try to stop up the water. And if you think about it, I know it sounds bad and this and that, but it gives us an idea of just what kind of people
Right.
we were facing at this time, and how much they cared, about themselves, obviously. But all of these bits of information give us a lot to understand just what kind of people were back then. And it's interesting because we see a lot of this now today. Again, same type of parallel, the same type of people, thinking that they'll fix it out with humanity and humanism and their own way. And the same exact thing went on back then, which is so impressive that Jesus actually compared the two.
Yes, and again, the way, because I think it is important to understand the character of the people that are here and that are our enemies, those that are intermingling themselves amongst the seed of men who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Um, that the character of the giants and the fact that they celebrate that they are, the blood relations of the fallen ones and the
Oh
children
yeah.
of the, these demigods.
Yeah.
Um, Go ahead.
And that was actually celebrated back in ancient Egypt, and a lot of these ancient pagan cultures. They consider themselves honored if they
Yes,
had blood of these
exactly.
Nephilim and the giants, and that was the great thing, that elongated heads, etc. That's a lot of the stuff was trying to mimic who they believed were their pagan gods, and that was ancestor worship.
Yes, exactly. And again, those are the things that people don't understand about the ancient mythologies and the pagan mythologies and the pantheon of gods and goddesses and how they had very long reigns and even lifespans in those ancient times, and how things are so different, that there was an age of the Titans and the Olympians and that all the creatures that lived during that time were very much larger stature, and the whole story of the pre-Adamic age is so interesting. I mean, it's literally like the Lord of the Rings, the whole narrative of trolls and dwarves and humans and hobbits and hybrids and giants and, giants with one eye and giants with two heads. It's just crazy. They did find an actual skeleton about an individual, a giant that had two heads and that lived. They had captured him. Have you seen or heard about the story of this particular giant?
I did not hear about the two-headed one. I heard about the one in Afghanistan. Did you hear about that one?
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
the Kandahar giant.
Took them
That's
away in the
all
plane.
very intriguing as well. But um, yeah, this story that I saw, and it's connected to a video that I believe they went to South America and they actually captured this two-headed giant, and he lived, survived going back on the boat, and
Really?
yeah, and they kept him as a slave for a certain while, but they even had his body that in some way they were able to preserve it, and he was this two-headed giant that we see mentioned in some of the ancient stories and the legends of the Jews. There's a mention of these particular giants, even in the Colburn Bible on the story about the destruction of Atlantis. It speaks about these giants as well.
Yeah, and it's funny. I think somebody in the chat said something about how they would be crossbreeding animals and humans, etc., before the flood, and I totally agree with that
Right,
too.
yeah,
A lot of that going on. So that's where you get a lot of these strange
right.
figures. Well, how long ago was this two-headed giant stories then that you were? When did they find one, or do you know?
Well, it dates back to like the 1800s sometime.
Okay.
It's an older story, and it was during in like during the conquistadors, that whole time, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of stories when you read, and people don't realize this either, but if you read about all of these conquerors, these conquistadors coming into South America and Central America, um, that they encountered a lot of these giants that were said to be. Some of them were actually the leaders of certain tribes, and
Mm-hmm.
there was, interdispersion of giants. There was even said to be, this giant that ruled over this tribe of hobbits that lived somewhere up there near Alaska, and that there was an individual, a pre-Adamite, a hominid species called the Dionysians, uh, Denisovians, or something of that nature, and they were little people. So there's a bunch of different, as far as the story of prehistory and those that were here upon the earth in those times. There's a lot of mention of very strange and particular beings, and
Yeah.
that a lot of what were the mix and the dispersions of the mixed beings, from the fallen angels and the giants mating with uh, even animals and humanity and different things of that nature. That
Yeah.
all these weird hybrid creatures came forth.
Yeah, I believe the follow the air is like when that's mentioned sometimes as a specific group. I believe that has to do with a lot with that fairy folk or diminutive beings that could pretty much, go into the supernatural in and out if they needed to. They could travel back and forth. They had that kind of power. That's what you do when you hear about fairies and such. And I believe that they were actually chased. The people, as people migrated tribes in different areas, they would be chasing these diminutive beings out of their areas. So that's why they would be ending up in places like Ireland and Northern Europe, etc., and probably in the Americas when they were in there, they were already chased out because of that, because there weren't, they just got a little ruthless, like the Giants. The Giants, nobody liked them as neighbors, and they would get to this point where they would get so mean that they would go around, killing the human beings, and then of course cannibalism started happening. So these, not even, pagans or God followers alike, did not like the Giants, and that's why the Giants had to continue to flee, because that was one of the main beings that they wanted out of there, and all the lands that human beings eventually went into.
Right. And yeah, there were a lot of odd and strange creatures alive during those times. And I still think there's a lot of very odd and peculiar creatures living and growing up in the world in a lot of places. And I still think that there's a lot of places that are not yet explored on the earth as well. And I do believe that the image of the Buddhist map and the stories of, the Srimad Bhagavatam and the fifth canto of the stories about some of these islands beyond the Arctic Circle, that there are things beyond that we don't know about, that we've not discovered, and which they are keeping from the rest of the world. That these kind of secrets, this kind of knowledge is being, kept and hidden in plain sight, even with the United Nations map of the world, that these kind of things are being
Yeah,
hidden from us.
it is one thing that kind of strikes me is how many of these ancient accounts. I mean, I have a numerous publications that actually document all the different things that people have found, and of course, it's up to the late 1800s, early 1900s that they actually put it out in the newspapers, and they actually talk about it as something wild man. You know, giant skeleton found. I mean, in the Americas, especially too, Ohio, Illinois, they're all over the place. They were, but it's just kind of fascinating to me how, early 1900s, everything gets kind of quietly shut up, and opinions change, and nobody wants to talk about it anymore. And then, bones disappear, etc. It's just
Hmm.
interesting how that happens.
Yeah, things are hidden.
Hmm. Okay, so going back now, we talking about the people who are trying to get aboard the ark and the water is too hot for them, etc. There was also reports of another thing that God actually helped to divinely stop people from rushing the ark and going on board, etc. And that were the animals that were in the area. Some
Uh-huh.
ancient sources tell us that the animals, wolves, tigers, etc., they kind of knew what was up and their time was up, and basically they just ravaged the people who tried to actually go aboard, and they just went after them. Even the birds went out and tried to attack the people who were trying to swim aboard the ark, which is kind of interesting.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
you heard about that. So all of these things, it's so interesting to find out that there was reasons for it in an ironic way. There had to be a flood. There had to be something that there was, something had to kind of stop the way these giants were being procreated and continued to go, because they would have just wrecked the world if they would have been allowed to continue. So it's kind of fascinating. So now, next we
Exactly.
go into a little bit after they went aboard the ark, which is another interesting thing that I found a few more things. Okay. Because not to be too graphic, but again, a lot of just weird type of sensual type of pleasures, etc., that are nowadays, again, with the modern parallel, happened back then. Okay. And when the eight and the rest of the people decided to go aboard the ark, God did not want anything to go on like that. No enjoyment of any kind for those people aboard the ark, because they were there to understand that they were saved, and they were the few that were saved, and they should be kind of reflecting on the deaths that were actually going on around them and not celebrating them. And that makes total sense to me. So no fun. Okay, none of that stuff. Now, the interesting part that I think I've talked with before is that Ham was a little mischievous, and his wife that he brought aboard was already pregnant. Okay. And there was a certain number that were supposed to be aboard the ark. And again, the tradition tells that this pregnancy was one of the fallen angels, or one of them, that actually tried to sneak their kind aboard. Because again, these Azazel and these other Nephilim knew that they were not going to go aboard. So if anything they can do to try to sneak their own kind in, or try to sneak something in, they would try to do it. So that's what some of these ancient texts are talking about, that actually Ham's wife was pregnant. So Noah was not to know this. Ham was trying his best, but obviously, if you're going to be aboard the ark for a year, you're going to understand that she's going to start showing, etc., pretty soon. So, one thing that I learned, which is very interesting, is that again, Noah was following God's command. The males went first to the ark, then the females, and they stayed on either side of the ark or slept on either sides to stay away from each other, because again, this is a time of reflection. Now, one ancient text, which is really cool, it basically states that Noah threw like oats or something on the ground, okay, in between the two sides, so that if anybody tried to strive over there, then they could see their footprints and they can get caught. And Ham felt pressured because he felt, okay, I got to make a statement here. I got to make it look like I'm the one who is actually the father of her children, that, or her child, or whatever is going to come out of her. So he actually went across and was with his wife that night and came back, and the footprints were showing that it was him. And that is a reason why Noah was so angry and was not really happy with Ham that much, especially after the ark and after they departed. Kind of interesting.
Oh yeah, no, I haven't heard that story either. That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
They're very cool.
Yeah. Okay. So now we get to the part where, of course, because the things are getting set here for after the ark is departed and the flood's all over with, and how Ham and Noah weren't exactly even getting along at this time because of that. Okay, that was one of the reasons, but he was probably a little mischievous in other reasons, but that was one thing that set Noah off. Now, after the flood, we talk about the people coming off in this part here in this volume that I'm talking about, but I also talk into more about the giants as being survivors of the flood, or at least being there after the flood. Okay. Now, one thing that's interesting is one author basically says, and I'm going to read it here: evolutionary anthropologists generally hate giants because they upset their pet theories. However, the evidence points to physical degeneration and not evolutionary improvement as the story of life on Earth. Giants prove that the Bible account of history is the true one, and that's not a popular concept with men whose hearts are at enmity against the idea of God. That's a good quote.
Yeah, I like that.
Like that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I believe, again, God was merciful and he allowed some of them to survive, because I don't, because these giants were born, and they didn't ask to be born that way, but that's basically, God doesn't play that. He tries to allow, as long as you try to be godly and follow him, he doesn't care where you come from. So look at Abel, So
Okay.
let's see here. We get into now. What's your thought about? Do you believe it's giants, or do you believe the Nephilim, or what do you believe as far as the name of the giants after the flood? Or would it be?
I think the Nephilim are actually the fallen angels that
I
were
believe that too.
banished and removed. Um, and then that the giants were born of them when they came into the daughters of Cain and took wives of all which they chose.
I believe that exactly true too. Yes, I believe that because a lot of people like to say, "Oh, the Nephilim were the giants," and "Oh, this," and "Oh, that." No, no, no. I don't. I mean, the more research I've done over these number of years, it's. I believe that the Nephilim were actually the 50 or so angels that were considered the fallen ones. They fell after they, for one reason, they disagreed with Adam being the viceroy of the garden, all the way back at square one. There, they didn't. They resented Adam for that. So they had to be the fallen ones, and they're the ones who gave birth to giants. And the giants, I believe one name is good enough for them, is called the Anakim or
Yeah,
the Anunnaki. You've heard that.
right.
That's
Uh-huh.
very popular. But the Anakim is more of the Jewish interpretation and name for them, which I use a lot. And then you have the 200 or so watchers that came down later on, before the flood too. And then you have the mighty men. And that's another name that we had before the flood. So those are the taller giants. Okay, they're about 12 feet tall. They can be 9 to 12. The other ones, the Anakim, can be about 9. So you have two different sizes of giants. And some interesting verses that we show, even in the Bible, we have Joshua 14:12. We have, "Now therefore, give me this mountain, whereas the Lord spake in that day, for thou heardest in that day how the Anakims were there, and that the cities were great and fenced." So it's interesting that the Bible talks about the Anakims themselves even after the flood. So somehow they must have survived, and they must have went on. And the thing is, they didn't really turn out that good, did they? They stayed evil, a lot of them, which is kind of sad.
Mhm.
Deuteronomy 1:28 has, "Whither shall we go? Our brethren have discouraged our hearts, saying, the people is taller, greater and taller than we. The cities are great and walled up to heaven. And moreover, we have seen the sons of the Anakim there." So again, we have the Anakims being mentioned. And this is all, I think a lot of this has to do with taking back the Holy Land when the giants decided just to stay there, and they didn't really care, right?
Right.
We have another group. Again, we talked about the mighty men of old, and they're also called the Rapha, or the Raphaim. Okay.
Yeah.
And a couple meanings of the name Rapha comes from to seize, to heal, or to pluck out, or also the dead. That's another interpretation of the word Rapha. Shades living in Hades, etc. Now, what might that mean? And one thing that I found is really interesting is that when these Rapha were multiplying, obviously.
The more you care, the stronger you can be.
We're
People
up,
don't
right.
mind you using
Hold
strong
on.
language about insidious things.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased, as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
I love motherhood more than I could have ever imagined. One of the most important things to me is nurturing a strong foundation in Yahusha's character in our children. That said, I made sheets that went over the fruits of the Spirit, the armor of God, the 10 Commandments, and creation days. Each day at breakfast, we would go over these and then read books like Cat in the Hat that just felt so void in meaning, but they loved the rhymes. I looked everywhere for rhyming biblical principles and couldn't find any. That's when I decided I would make them myself. Praise God, we now have our first book, Eliana and Ezra's Journey Through the Fruits of the Spirit, a first in a series. Every morning we now can continue to build strong principles even through rhymes, and I wanted to offer it to the babies in your life too. Please go to Sacred Word Publishing and search Fruits of the Spirit to get your copy, or you can go to prophecyforchildren.com. Thank you so much.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
Sons are the angels of God, looked upon the daughters of men and found them fair, and took of them wives, and their sons became of old great men of renown. So they have been mixing with us on a genetic level since the time of Enoch and Ezekiel's will.
Betrayed by the sun, moon, and stars in a mansion. There's got to be planets like ours. Some conceive of a face on the surface of Mars, so in need of a meaning and purpose we long. Indeed, they believe that they sight beyond gods, or that maybe with time we'll do right and evolve. Now eventually reach what they seek and then solve all the problems of man, but they really don't know that the works of our hands are but just filthy rags. We travel the lands that they got on my lapses, and within not much of the facts of imagine that God's came in activists.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Final segment, and boy, the show just goes by so quickly.
Very fast.
But yeah, let me turn it back over to you, Brett, and anything else you'd like to bring up, let's make sure to cover it.
Yeah, I was thinking we do a little, if you want to do a little Q&A after
Yeah,
this.
certainly.
Okay, I'll do my last
Better
point here.
do it now, because they're 5 minutes behind us. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll just do my last point, which I think Tam or somebody was interested in. The Rapha, again, the Rephaim, there's a verse in Isaiah, I think 26:14, that talks about them and saying they are dead, they shall not live. Some of the traditions, I think I might have mentioned this that's another broadcast, but it's interesting about the Rapha, the Rephaim, is that they did get large, and obviously from my research, from what I understand, is that the Nephilim and the Watchers, when they both fell, their existence was going to be obviously mortal on this earth, and they were going to continue on this earth, but only until the flood came and took them all out. But they would have probably continued on. Now, the Rapha, since they have part human and part angelic or terrestrial angelic DNA, blood, whatever genes in them, they have part of that immortality or part of that, how they would have continued on to live, even just possibly even like 600 or 800 years, because I think Og might have lived 800 years, but they had the potential, let's just say, to live a lot longer than a normal human being were living at the time. So one reason that I believe that they actually were called the dead is because they had a horrible existence once they got older, because the human part of them started to die when a normal human would, around the time they would be dying, but the longevity part of them, the terrestrial angelic part, was staying alive, even past this point. So again, there's a reason why God does not want these mixtures to go on, because they just don't work and they're not good for humanity or anything on this earth. So now these Raphaim were actually dying. Part of them were dying, part of them were living on, and that's why they were called the living dead, because they were half dead. Imagine your body, half of it dying. It'd be horrible. It'd be a horrible existence.
Yeah, true. And I think that they are also all the forces of Legion, which are the spirits of evil, the demonic entities that possess. And it says in the book of Enoch that they would be looking for bodies to possess,
Oh yeah.
and that they feed off of, feed off the terror and the spiritual fear that is exhibited as a reaction to their existence in this world. They are a lot of what we see, with regard to the demonic entities, the cryptid beings that are, and which have a lot of mythologies surrounding them, skinwalkers and things of that nature.
Interesting. If you want, I'll read that point. I got it off the Zohar actually, real quick.
Yeah,
if
sure.
you want. How do you say that the Raphaim is from the linguistic root of lax, weak? The explanation is because those giants were from two sides, meaning from an angelic source and from a human female source, and were made more hopeless to exist on the earth. Similarly, the Rephaim were even more despairing until they released themselves altogether from the above and were living long lives. When they became weaker, half their body became weakened and died, and half their body remained living, since they were composed half of angels that do not deteriorate and die, and half of humans that do eventually die. When half their body was deceased, they used to pick herbs from the field grasses, meaning poisonous herbs, swallowed them, and died, because they wished to kill themselves. And they were called the Rephaim. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So we'll get into more, I think Og and will be the next one, and I'll get a few more examples
Sweet.
about giants in the land. So we'll talk about Og and Sihon in the
That's
next.
great. Yeah, that sounds like fun.
Okay. Anybody have any thoughts or any questions? We can do a Q&A.
Just post them in the chat. Oh, and there were a couple of comments in the chat room that I did want to share. Let me see.
Let's do it.
Yeah, somebody was speaking about the Rephaim. There's so much chat going on. The scroll is.
Can anybody reverb what they or re-speak what they were saying earlier?
Well, they're just talking about giants and caves and lands. Like we have the whole story of the Paiutes and how they were at war with the redhead cannibal giants. They were called the loot eaters or something of that nature.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. I've heard that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a question about Nimrod lived so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because that woman that was Ham's wife and that was aboard the ark, I believe that actually her son was Cush, and that was the father of Nimrod. So obviously you're going to have Cush living a long life, and you're going to have Nimrod living a long life until he was taken out.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically another reason why Nimrod became very large too. Ari.
Yeah, we see even especially in that book, The Travels of Noah, that Noah, because he was the last one to live 900 and some plus years, 950,
I think.
Yeah, I think he was a little bit older than Adam. And Methuselah was the one that lived the longest, I think
969.
969. Yeah, it was a long time, but we do see that during Noah's life, he was watching, most everybody else die off before he was. He was one of those that did have a long lifespan after the flood, and even Shem only lived 600 years, and then by the time of Abraham, it was 175 years, and Abraham was led by an angel of the Lord from the wilderness outside of where he was living with regard to Babylon, being he was being hidden by his father. Him and his mother were living in a cave, but when he was 13 years old, he was led to the tent of Shem and Noah, and he was then indoctrinated into the order of the ancients, the Melchizedekian priesthood, and
Who?
learned a lot.
Who was?
Abraham
Oh, yeah, definitely.
under Shem and under Shem and Noah, and basically he was passed on the priesthood thereafter. But by the time his life, it was 175 years. That was his lifespan of Abraham, and then by the time of Moshe, it was 120, which is what God said that he would reduce the lifespans to. So yeah, all of that is very intriguing and something to consider, and something that a lot of people miss. They forget that, our ancestors lived a lot longer than we did. I mean, just imagine Adam lived, 930 years. That's a long time.
Yeah,
That's a
for sure.
lot of life and a lot of learning and the
I heard.
things he must have known.
Oh, imagine. I know. I mean, it's like 10 times as long as us. If you think about it,
Right. Yeah, for sure.
you're 15 now, you're 150 back then. It's amazing.
Right.
I also heard that Eber, was a grandson of Shem, was actually one of the wise people that was bringing up Abraham.
Yeah,
And
that's where the Hebrew,
right? They got the term Hebrew, where it was
yeah.
like a derogatory term, I believe, for Abraham and the Israelites, is because they call them Hebrews because they wouldn't play, they wouldn't go along with the pagan program. So it's
Right.
almost like a moniker, and it's because they were listening to Eber. And Eber
Yes.
again, Eber and Shem. Shem was monumental in so many things.
Oh,
I've been in
yes.
the next
That was,
volume. I talk about him a lot because he was such a force, and he hardly gets recognized, but he did a lot of work for God back then. Again,
yes, without a doubt.
I got one that somebody asked about Ham being cursed by Noah after the flood, and yeah, I agree with that too. That exactly happened, and I agree. I believe that it was being some of the things that he was doing before the flood was actually really getting Noah upset with him as a son. And didn't you hear? I'm sure, Zen, about where he actually ascribed a lot of this occult information and poisons and ways to pharmakia and etc.
Yeah.
on tablets, and because he wasn't allowed to bring them aboard the ark, but he buried them somewhere, and after the flood he went out and picked them up, and that's one of the reasons why he became so powerful in ways, and he was looked on as a god, obviously as a patriarch, because he had a lot of this occult information and was very, very good at working magic and etc. back then because of this.
Yes. Yes, and we see that, they had discovered and passed on the writings of the Watcher, and they knew that they were not supposed to do that, but did so anyways. So yeah.
Yes. Any other thoughts? Anybody? Well, we can talk about Og and Sihon if nobody else has any questions still.
Yeah, sure.
Og, again, I believe that again, this is something that the research showed, and I don't know, Zen, if you've heard about this, but Og and Sihon, obviously they're brothers, probably twins, because a lot of the times, especially in these early days, like, Cain and Abel, I believe that they were twins. I believe God, for some reason, had twins to be born and enabled that a lot, probably just to get the populations going quickly. Okay, so Og and Sihon were
Uh-huh.
twins. Is that so? Basically, I've some of the research shows that when Ham brought his wife in front of Noah to go aboard the ark, Og and Sihon were her children already from whatever infidelity she did, of course. And again, she was pregnant again, but of course they didn't want to say that. But that's why Noah was in a pickle, because once he saw that, Ham probably loved her and said, "Please bring her aboard, and please bring Og and Sihon." And Noah was trying to follow God and saying, God told me only to bring a certain number aboard and specific people and groups. So that's why I believe that Noah allowed, said, you can't come aboard, but you can hide, aboard on the top of the ark and find a little place there where you can stay and this and that. And that's why I believe that Og was allowed to actually stay on there, is because of this family link.
Yeah, that's very interesting. But
You
yeah,
heard
they
that?
were very close. Even Goliath was cousins with David, and so yeah, there was a family. The enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent was actually a family battle. Cain and Abel, they were half brothers, stepbrothers. So.
Yeah, and I also believe that Og was Eleazar, which is a servant of Abraham. So
Right. Yeah, I've read
you've heard,
some stories that are connected with that too.
yeah. So basically, again, the one thing that Ham's wife said was to get them on board, or at least to get them above the ark or holding on, is that, Og will serve your generations if you allow him on board. And of course, he's a son of the Rephaim, so he's going to live a lot of years, which he did, 800 years. I'm not quite sure which, but that's what I believe, that he was a servant, and they pushed him down the line to serve all the way down to Abraham. And then he had a thing for Sarah, and
Yeah.
Abraham did not like that he was kind of putting the moves or thinking about it. And that's one reason that I think they banished him and kicked him out. Am I correct? Or is that right, Zen?
Yeah, that's yeah, as far as the traditions of the Jews written by
Yeah.
Johann Eisenmenger, that
Eisenmenger. Yeah,
yeah,
that's the guy I mentioned earlier. He has
right.
quite a number of things in that book.
Yeah, he does bring forth a lot of information. And so yeah, I do think that those things are things that we should consider, because again, it's found in these ancient manuscripts, and a lot of things which are intriguing, and which we don't know about, we can learn from these ancient voices, like the
Yeah.
Birthday Rabbi Eleazar. That's a fascinating book. The Legends of the Prophets and the Patriarchs.
Oh yeah.
That's
That one, Bearing Gold, is that one that you
yeah,
did?
yeah, Bearing.
Yeah. Yeah, those there's a few stables that once you start doing this research, just the ones that Zen mentioned, and of course, Legends of the Jews is great too. That's like a
Yeah.
5-volume thing, but it's those few uh, are considered, in my opinion, the staples where you find a lot of good information to start with. Some of these other things that I've found, about Ham walking across the aisle on the ark, and getting the sawdust on his feet or whatever that would they sprinkled on there. Some of those are more obscure, and they take a while, because you find one source and then you research another and you keep going. So you can find those, but they're not as easily known. But some of those are very good. Like The Two Babylons is another very good book that links Semiramis and Nimrod and Cush to a lot of these pagan gods that we have. Just to kind of go into that real quick, these pagan gods and this ancestor worship, from what the research I found, is basically It's all set up by the serpent and Cain, all back in just after the garden in the fall. Is basically it's the worship of themselves. And you have the serpent
Right.
basically commandeering Adam's once position as manager of the garden and God's viceroy on this earth. And the serpent just kind of commandeered him, because if he was the father of Cain, who basically things revolve around Cain, hence my book, that the first book. But things revolve around Cain so much. The way of Cain is basically a lot of things that he helped instigate. The pagan religion, humanism, a lot of these concepts are brought on by the serpent and Cain, his son. And you have ancestor worship being the father god, the son, basically in the sky, the representative of the serpent himself. Okay, obviously the father god, kind of supplanting Adam. Adam was, and actually they did worship Adam too. The pagans did. They made a god out of these parents and these early people. And you got Eve, obviously turned into Mother Earth and turned into the goddess mother, etc. Because Cain, of course, that was Cain's mother, right? So all these pagan gods that kind of came down the lines, Greek, Roman, etc. They came basically. They're all the names for the same gods. Like Ishtar basically comes back to Babylon. They basically all come back to that Middle Eastern area, or that area where Iraq is now today, Mesopotamia. It's all based on ancestor worship. You agree on
Yes,
that?
it is. Yes. And we see that even in the Wisdom of Solomon. It talks about, the idols and how that came about from the pagans worshiping their fallen angel and their demigod
Yeah.
brother. So,
Yeah, that's basically where paganism comes from. And because when you hear the definition, the classic definition of pagan, it's not just a person from the country or whatever. It's basically someone who believes in something that is not God, that of the Bible. That's pretty much what it is. So in this whole counter religion that Cain helped to start, the people had to kind of get lured away from God and from the presence and believing in him. So basically that's where ancestor worship really come from. And that's where all these father gods, okay, you got the serpent, you got the sun gods, and I'm talking not from the sun in the sky. I'm talking about a descendant, a direct son. You got Cain, you got the worship of him as the son. And you also have the nemesis of Cain being Abel himself. And Abel was actually turned into a god. But basically, Abel and Adam were the two gods that were a little, misled. They needed straightening out. They weren't quite sure what they were doing, or else they were like Mars, was another avatar of Abel, because they're warlike and they fought the way of Cain and the serpent. They didn't want to be like him. So of course these are followers of God, Abel and Adam. So they were the wayward ones. They're considered the opposite when you think about paganism itself. The essence of paganism is pretty much everything the opposite of God is right, or is their way, or is the way of the world. So you kind of think it's either one way or the other. You agree on that, Zen?
yes. With the time that we do have remaining, if you would give out your website and share your, your books and the titles and.
Okay, yeah. The first book, like which I'm reading out of right now, is called The Way of Cain. It's the Rise of Mystery Babylon. Okay, it's a series of will be 3 volumes. This is the first volume. It's called The Way of Cain, and there's 2 parts in each volume, and they are at sacredwordpublishing.com if you want to check them out. And the next volume, which I was right about 5 or 6 years ago, it was called The Tower of Babel. And it's a lot deeper than this one. This one, as I was mentioning earlier, has a lot of those sources that the classical sources, the sources that, the legends of the Jews, etc., a lot of sources put together in a way where I talk about the parallels of what people considered the way of Cain back then and how it manifests itself today and how we see it all around us. The same way of Cain, humanism, paganism, everything, still here. It's just under new faces. and it's still hidden. The Tower of Babel is the second one, and that goes a lot deeper into all these things. It just, that's where you get all those obscure sources, and I talk about the origins of ancestor worship and paganism in detail, showing how a lot of these different gods of different empires and societies are actually based on the same ones. So it's a little bit deeper, and it's a little, I like it too, because it does get into more of the politics of things. This one talks more of culturally, the way of Cain, and talks about how, but that one, it gets a little bit deeper and gets into the lost 10 tribes, gets into a lot of different things that seem to make sense. And those are the next two. And my website is mysterybabylon.com if anybody's interested. And I think I left my email if anybody wants to email me and just give questions or comments on the show or anything else that they might be interested in. I'll be happy to try to respond back.
All right. Hey, brother, we do greatly appreciate you and everybody in the chat that came to be with us and join us this evening.
I really do too.
It's so crazy that we're almost to 2024.
I know.
This year has been just wild, but I do pray that the Most High bless all of you, watch over all of you, keep you all safe, lead you in guidance and discernment, and may the world just be at peace. Just, even though I know the prophecies, yes, I know what they say and what's coming, but for the children's sake, I just pray for peace, comfort, semblance of normality, and let the evil people be squashed in their goals of just creating chaos and order out of chaos. So we just appreciate everybody, and thank you again, Brett, for joining us, and look forward to release of your book, which he said he will be releasing it in February. I'll be releasing the calendar tomorrow.
Hopefully by the end of February. I think the next show we have is end of February too. So hopefully it'll be done by then. I'm going to try hard, but yeah, I want to thank everybody too. And please do your own research if you need. Don't just follow what they say, because this has been in the works for 2 millennia to get you to think and be this way. I mean, they've been working hard on that. Christianity and true Judaism and is the only things that are stopping it right now is the belief in the word and actually looking things up for yourself and understanding. That's how you wade through the muck and everything that's going on now. So please do your own research and don't believe everything you hear.
Right. I'd love for you to show us a video, Brian Tucker, of the Giant City State Park. It sounds fascinating. Maybe we can all take a field trip there. That would be a wonderful thing. Giant City State Park in Illinois.
Where is that? I would love to find that.
Makanda, Illinois.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sounds fascinating. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, you're up that way. So, yeah, you should check it out.
Censorship and regulation is becoming an ever-growing problem in today's modern media.